What's going on, Planet Beat Nation? You got DJ Johnny-CEE here in the Planet Beat Studios from Long Island, New York. And I am here with the great Lou Gallo sitting at my side. He is the immediate past New York State Chairman of Commission of Social Justice, the CSJ, the anti-defamation arm of the Orders of Sons and Daughters of Italy in America, and the national consultant for the Order on Columbus. It doesn't get better than this when it comes to Columbus, and we are bringing to you a special Planet Beat airing with all there is about Columbus to be told by the great Lou Gallo. And it doesn't get better than this. I am going to let this man school you guys. And here is the great Lou Gallo right now.
DJ Johnny, Cristoforo Colombo da Genova.
Grazie.
I'm so glad that DJ Johnny has allowed me to come before this program. I have decided to come back after 500 years because I am very angry and very perturbed at what's going on in this country, and for that matter, worldwide. I see my statues being vandalized and destroyed. I see my holiday being questioned and taken off the calendars in the schools and the municipalities in the states. And I say to myself, why? What is this all about? How horrible is this? Why is my legacy being distorted? Why am I being maligned and stigmatized? Because they claim I'm a genocidal maniac, a rapist, and a murderer? Far from the truth, ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and my sisters. And I'm here to dispel and debunk all those misconceptions as much as I possibly can to tell you the true story. Because I was there, okay? And because I was there, you're going to get the true legacy of my past. And hopefully you will learn something from this. First of all, this bit about an invasion. I took 90 guys in a ship, and we went and transmigrated across the Atlantic. And by the way, it took us quite some time. After a while, by my fourth voyage, I could do it in 16 days. This took about 33. I had to stop off at the Canary Islands, by the way, and get some provisions. And then we went due west. And my mission was clear because it took me 7 years to convince Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and other people I attempted to convince of going west, sailing west to reach the east. And I thought, from experience as a sailor, way back since I was 10 years old, I can tell you, with my little skiff, around Genoa and the Bay of Genoa, and with my brother, we used to go down to the docks and just smell that air and look at all these people and all the hubbub of activity. We just loved it. By 14, I enlisted on some of these ships and actually became a sailor. I was very physical. I could jump from gunwale to gunwale, from ship to ship. I can bounce up that ladder all the way to the crow's nest without too much trouble. Even in a storm, I could hoist the sails all by myself. I really loved it. By the time I was 18, I was a full time sailor. I had made my mission. My mission in life was to sail. Okay, my dad, he wanted me to go back into the business, the weaving business. He was a kind of a jack of all trades, but uh, the sea just drew me. It just drew me tremendously so. And so I started noticing some things. And one of the things I noticed was that when we sailed down around the coast of Africa, and in those days we always explored making sure that we could see the coast. We never went out the way I did, all the way out beyond the middle of the ocean. And I noticed that around the Cape Verde Islands, the current went west. Hmm. I also was very understanding of the fact that the Portuguese had rounded Africa and landed in what you guys call India. And I said, well, I knew there were lands east. I knew there were lands north because when I was a budding sailor, I did sail near Iceland and Ireland. And some of those sailors there showed me cadavers that didn't look European. They looked more like Asians or kind of swarthy kind of complexion. And I thought, hmm. I noticed certain things in the water plants and little artifacts that I never saw before. So I thought, well, if there's lands north, if there's lands east, why can't there be lands? And there's land south. Obviously, we went around Africa and the Portuguese. Why can't there be lands west? So I contacted a good buddy of mine. He was a physician and a mathematician, Paolo Toscanelli, and with his help and with some other evidence that I had, Alfragan, a Persian mathematician, Eratosthenes, a Greek mathematician, and we put together some calculations. And we predicted that the length of longitude going west, it's about 45 miles. And to get to Asia, obviously would probably be about 4,000 miles, something like that. Historians later proved that I was dead wrong, but I didn't care. I'm going west because my mission, as explained in the capitulations of the Santa Fe capitulations, which was the name of the contract with the sovereigns, stated that I was to follow a route and discover new lands for Spain. And since we were all devout Catholics, the whole idea was to meet the great Khan of Cathay. Cathay is China. You call China today. And why did we want to meet him? Because when I read Marco Polo's travels, and when I was reading his travels, I noticed he met the Khan at that time. And that was like 200 years before me. And the Khan got really interested in Christianity. And he said, send me your priests and missionaries. Send me the oils from the Holy Sepulchre of Christ. I'm really interested in Christian doctrine. Well, the trip was kind of tough because when Paulo went back and tried to encourage the priests and the missionaries to go, the trip was arduous. It was difficult, very heavy, and very difficult terrain. So I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick up his trail. So I had the sovereigns give me what I call letters of credence at that time. And it's basically an introductory greeting. Hi, I'm Cristoforo Colombo. I want to meet you. I want to enlist your support because the idea was to enlist his support with his armies and, of course, the Spanish armies under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. We would unite. We would wrest the Holy Land from the Muslim Turks. And we would then spread Christianity throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. And we had to do this. You have to understand that in our calculations, I'm a millenarian. And that means I believe in the second coming of Christ. And I figured out that since the creation of time to like 1500, there was like 6,845 days that have passed. All right, 6,845. So we only had 155 days to get this done, to convert everyone, to prepare for the coming of Christ so that we could all be saved from eternal damnation. That was the intent of the trip. Okay? Oh, yeah, there were the dyes and the perfumes and the spices and the tapestries and all of that. Yeah, but that wasn't the original mission. And the whole idea, and this is where I get criticized, oh, he's out for gold. The gold in all this exploration was a means, not an end. It was to finance this crusade so that we could meet the great Khan and convert the rest of the world to Christianity. I was a very devout man, and this is what I believed. So when I finally did set a course on August the 3rd, 1492 from Palos, Spain, and I chose Palos because the sailors there are really good. They're the best around. And I needed the help of Martin Alonso Pinzon and Vicente Pinzon because they were very well respected. I made them captains of my ships. Martin had the Pinta. Vicente had the Nina. And I took the Santa Maria. It's a crappy ship, but what are you going to do? That's another story I can get into, but I won't. So here we go, and off we go. And so when I get there, I'm looking for the Great Khan of Cathay, and according to the travels, this is going to be bustling cities and towns. This is going to be palaces embroidered in gold, streets paved with gold. And I land on an island in the Bahamas, you call the Bahamas, and it was loaded with naked people. And the crew goes, what the heck is this? I said, well, in the travels, Marco Polo did say that the islands surrounding that particular Asia, which by the way was interchangeable, we called it India, would be these naked people. So I used the Spanish term Indos, meaning inhabitants of the islands of the Indies that surrounded India. So it wasn't a critical term. It wasn't a defamatory term. It was a geographic term. They say, "Well, Indians, that's so wrong. That was a mess. That's discriminatory." No, it's not. At that time, we were learning about the world, so I had to give them a name. I give them that name, and it was a discovery. What does discovery mean? Look it up. It says to take something unknown and make it known. I did that. And when people talk about the discovery, he didn't discover anything. It's a lot of bunk. Because I did discover something. For the Europeans, this was truly a discovery, and it was a discovery for those natives. They never saw white men with beards. They never saw all this clothing, those majestic ships, and those superior weapons. It was a discovery for them, too. And the revisionists and the detractors, when they talk about discovery, they make it sound like he's not the first one. To them, discovery means virgin land discovered first. And then that's it. I didn't want to be first. I told you I wanted to be the Grand Khan. I expected to see bustling cities and towns. So the criticism about me not being first is immaterial. Who cares? I didn't want to be first. It had nothing to do with, oh, yeah, I heard about the Vikings, and there was talk about the Romans and the Libyans and all these other people. The Egyptians might have been there, and the Polynesians and the Chinese. Yeah, okay, great. But that wasn't the mission. It had nothing to do with this discovering virgin land. I was looking for the Great Khan of Cathay. And when I finally reached there, I'm hearing detractors are calling it an invasion? What the heck is an invasion? Forceful entry with hostile intent. I didn't force my way in. I wasn't hostile about it. I was stunned by what I saw. And that initial contact, by the way, a modern astrophysicist said about my discovery, Neil deGrasse Tyson. You know what he said? It was the greatest event of the human species ever since continental drift, because we were one landmass known as Pangea. And then there was continental drift, and the peoples of the world started to separate. It was my discovery that united two worlds, and it caused the greatest transmigration the world has ever seen in its history, planetary history. People from all over the world, particularly Europe, further exploration and settlement. Frobisher, Verrazano, Caboto, Cartier, de Champlain, La Salle, and then later on, Cortez and Pizarro and the whole bunch. And they started to develop this land, and they started to colonize it. And eventually what evolved? The greatest country on the face of the earth, the United States of America. And that's another thing. It really should be the United States of Colombia. But time doesn't permit me to get into that. Because Vespucci tried to steal my thunder. There's a whole history about that. Someday I'll tell you about that. But you really should have been Colombians. You're not Americans. You're really Colombians. But that's, again, time for another story. So this fact that I wasn't invading anything. I immediately established a route. I started to explore. I met all these different kinds of people. It was very cordial. I met Chief Guacanagari, and Chief Guacanagari was a young chief. In the Caribbean, they called him caciques, and he is a great cacique. He wanted to meet with me. He was stunned by what he saw, too. I gave him hawk spells and beads and some of our clothing. He gave me gold nuggets, gold plating, and of course I wanted to know where all this gold was because I needed it to finance the crusade. I used to say to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, hey, if you run out of dough, take my share. All right, because we had a whole contract. I was under contract. And as a result, I had to explore. And that started some of my problems because let me tell you what happened at the beginning. On December 25th, 1492, I got into a shipwreck. It wasn't my fault. I was dead tired. I was negotiating the shoals on the northern coast of Hispaniola. I was getting very tired. You see, I was afflicted with writer's syndrome. My hands would curl up. I couldn't even hold a helm after a while. I couldn't even hold a writing instrument. So I gave fair warning on the ship that no apprentice, we used to call them grommets. They were young kids, okay? And I said never a grommet should take care of the helm. So I gave it to one of the mates. He got tired and he told one of the grommets, to go take the helm against my orders. And sure enough, the kid ran it aground. So as we're trying to save the ship, I put a call out. One of my men got into a rowboat, and we got a hold of Guacanagari, and Guacanagari actually saved my cargo, took some of the timber. We built a fort, and since it was December 25th, we called the settlement Fort Navidad, Nativity, the birth of Christ. Being a very holy and devout man that I am, that's what we did. And he guarded that hut, all my belongings and all my cargo. And I said to him, Guacanagari, I want to give you a feast on the Nina. And he said, nah, I'm giving you a feast. And he did. Oh my God. We were down by the beach. All this food, more gifts we exchanged. I gave him one of my collars. I gave him my red shoes. I gave him a ring. He gave me some more gold plating and gold artifacts. I mean, it was just a great thing. Okay. And so the relationship was very solid, very respectful, and very loving. I consider the Taino people the greatest people I ever met in all my travels, in all my 54 years. They were just great people, very docile, very generous, very fearful types, scary, easy, skittish, and very promiscuous. Some of them were pretty promiscuous. They used to actually give them their women, and that was like a gift. And the men, when I started getting abusive, I stopped it right away and turned the women back. So this thing that, we had a child ring and a prostitution ring, it's all a bunch of bunk. Where do they get this stuff? It's a bunch of bunk. However, I said to the men, the Santa Maria went under. I'm going to go back again, and I'm going to get you another ship. I left 39 men behind. And those 39 men, I gave them very strict orders, and they're documented. 1, don't maraud the village. 2, stay away from the women. 3, develop a strong relationship with Chief Guacanagari. 4, you find any gold, keep it aside, keep an accounting of it. We'll exchange it with goods of equal value. In fact, to them, copper was more important than even gold. So they were more willing to be distributive about it than, let's say, Europeans. Anyway. And I said, if you go off the island, you let Guanacanari where you're going. So I take off. I come back. All 39 are dead. Oh, my God, what the heck happened? Guacanagari said to me, they did the complete opposite that you requested. The complete opposite. Thanks to Diego de Arana. Now, these are people you don't even know because nobody tells you who they are. And Rodrigo Escobedo and Pedro Gutierrez. They separated into predatory gangs. They went around the villages. They stole the gold. In fact, they made little catches of gold and they hid it. They didn't keep any accounting. It was for them and their gang. They actually accosted the women. Each man had about 4 or 5 concubines on his own. They were living the high life. They used to beat up the men and make them slaves and the boys and make the women concubines and then carve out their little fiefdoms. Piece of land here, piece of land there. And they held up in the fort. Well, Kayanabo from the kingdom of Maguana, a Carib, most hostile people on those islands, and people whom the Tainos had a lot of trouble with. And I was asked to help him, and that's another story too. Well, Kayanabo came and killed all 39. So if you're here talking about or listening to all this savagery and brutality, you could blame those 3 I just mentioned. I wasn't even there. I was on my way back to Spain. I'll give you a second instance. After my second voyage, writer syndrome was acting up on me. I was totally exhausted. I was on my way back to Navidad. No, I'll back up on that because what happened after those 39 were dead, the men were revengeful. They wanted to cut up every freaking Indian they could find. And I said, no, you're not doing that. We're just going to move further east. And we established a settlement called La Isabela on the northern shore of Hispaniola. I brought with me some missionaries in that second voyage. And Fray Bernardo Buell was scolding me up and down. And he said, these 39 men died because you were too friendly with them. I says, you're here to spread the word of Christianity to this land. He says, I'm not doing anything. and he and his gang commandeered a ship and went back to Spain. So this whole bit about conversion was retarded. I couldn't do it until much later. We didn't convert the first Indian there until 1496. All right. And they wanted to kill Guacanagari. I said, no, we're not doing this. Now, you have to understand something. At this point, this was a pivotal event because here I'm trying to maintain cordial relations with these people. I got men that are revengeful and they want to kill them all. And I'm trying to stress that we need to develop very strong relations between the two. And I'm the intermediary between us all, keeping my men at bay and still trying to establish a cordial relations. That's the point where the enterprise went sour and my troubles increased. I had more trouble with the Spaniards than I do with the natives because of their vengeful attitude. And that's why, let me go back to that after my second voyage. I come back, writer syndrome is acting up on me. I want to go to what you call Puerto Rico, pick up some Caribs and burn their canoes because when I left for the second ship, for the second trip, back to Spain, Guacanagari brought me down the beach. He says, listen, you got to help me out. The Caribs are enslaving my people. Uh, Caciques down there were allowed 20 wives. So Behekio from the kingdom of Zaragua had killed one of his wives, and Cayanapo had kidnapped another one. He says, I need help. He says, all right, I'll take care of it. So when he came back with 1,200 men and 17 ships, right away everybody said, yeah, there's the invasion. No, it wasn't an invasion. We were going to start to settle in. I had to deal with the Caribs. And then when I landed on Guadalupe and Santa Cruz, which you call St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, I wiped up all the canoes to help Guacanagari. I was doing a friendly act for Guacanagari. Because what does the word Carib mean in the Caribbean tongue, the Arawak tongue? To the Tainos, it means strong men in warfare. And what does Taino mean? People of the good. And boy, did they live up to their name. They're such decent, honest, good people. Not my men. They didn't think so. They wanted to wipe them out because, well, they killed 39 men. So here I am trying to keep them at bay. So anyway, I come back. Because I couldn't go to Puerto Rico, I literally blacked out. I was so exhausted that they had to carry me off the ship. I had blacked out. My brothers brought me back to help. It took back to health. It took me a couple of weeks. I was out of commission for 5 months. What happened in those 5 months? The place was in shambles. The island of Hispaniola was a wreck. These men were going around, continuing their vengeful attitude. And of course, rightfully so, Cayanapo and Guatiguana from the natives were fighting back. So when I came to, they did a smart thing. The characters who started all this stuff, they commandeered another ship to go back because they knew I would cite them for certain crimes and have them arrested and put on trial in Spain. So I couldn't deal with them. So what did I do to create peace? I went into the interior and I actually captured 1,500 natives. I took 500 of them, the most rebellious ones, and shipped them back to Spain as prisoners of war. The critics say they were slaves. No, they weren't slaves. They were fighters. They were warriors. They were prisoners of war. And another thing, I couldn't declare anybody a slave. Only the sovereigns could. And Queen Isabella, who wrote back to me, used to say, I don't want slavery. I'm going to instruct these people in the faith. We're going to baptize them, and we're going to make them Christians. And in those times, the ideology was, if you're a Christian, you can't be enslaved. I said, fine. I said, one other thing. If you do that, bring them back so that they can spread the word amongst their own people. And if you make them work, pay them. That didn't happen until they decided to create an empire. Yeah, they paid them all right. They made them peons with a barely subsistence wage, but at least they paid them. But I was predicting that years before. Okay? So I had another problem with Francisco Roldan. No, that was my third voyage. Yes, that's my third voyage. So, okay. So I handled that situation, fighting off these skirmishes, fortifying Isabella with a wall. We settled in. We built a forge. We built a dam. We built a church. We were settling in. Didn't steal any land from anybody. If you come thousands of miles from Europe, where am I going to go? I got to sit someplace. So I put myself there. We only had at the most at that time 600 men. That's all it was. In fact, the 1,200 that came over, I had to send 600 back. They all came down with malaria. So I sent 600 back. And again, all my explorations were trying to meet the Grand Khan. That's why I kept coming back. I got to find the Grand Khan. I could never find him. But because I thought I was in Asia, I was having a difficult time. I didn't know until Vespucci found out and, through peer review said, you found the whole mundus novus, as they say in Latin, the whole new world. Until the day I died, I always thought I was still in Asia or India. We used to call it India at the time. Okay, now coming back on my third voyage, I ran into another problem. Okay, I was wound up in the Virgin Islands. I came in through Dominica and Martinique, that area, the Caribbean islands there, went up through 4 Virgin Islands. And when I got back, my God, my brother says, we got a problem again. I said, what now? And he said, Francisco Roldan, who was my supervisor of all the work on the islands, had commandeered the entire island and he was in control. I said, well, how did this happen? I said to my brother Bartolomeo, how did this happen? He said, well, you were gone for 4 years. I said, yeah, I was gone for 4 years. The sovereigns were too busy marrying off their 3 kids and they had deaths in the family. I couldn't get their attention. So I finally did. They said, all right, start on third voyage. So I start the third voyage. And Roldan had said, see, Columbus, he doesn't care about you. He just left you here to die. He's taking care of himself. So, you want more glory, you want less work, and more sex with the women, you come in with me. He said that. Just those words. And off he went. I don't know why. He stole the tribute, because that was something you do. You show tribute. You are now part of a Spanish realm, and so the people of the realm would pay a tribute. That's what we used to do in those days. So he took that and stole it. It's supposed to go to the sovereign king and queen. He ruined the grain. He killed the cattle. I don't know why the heck he did that. And he went around, again, more killing, more marauding, declared himself the head of the island. He have no right to do that. Only the sovereigns make that appointment. And he held up in the province or the kingdom of Zaragua, which is in southwest Hispaniola. I get there. My brother tells me the problem. I sent 3 separate envoys to Roldan to talk about what's going on here. He refused to meet. Absolutely flatly refused to meet. By the 4th time, he comes marching in, and he slapped an ultimatum right on my table. This is what he said. Number 1, this is such a horrible place, the heat, humidity, and all this work. Anyone that wants to go back to Spain, you give them safe passage, and by the way, compensate them with a slave. Those who want to stand behind, make sure they got a slave, because I just created a plantation system called encomienda. And I put natives on in, they were working the land. I wasn't supposed to do that. I never had natives work those lands. I used to have the men do it, and I used to petition the crown to give me more people, more miners, more workers. I never asked the natives to do that kind of work. And they blame me that I created the encomienda system. No, it was him. And then he said, I want to be the alcalde, the mayor for Zaragua for life. And the 4th thing, you don't agree to those 3 demands, we kick you off the island. He's a character. So what did I do?
Oh, boy.
I signed the ultimatum. He was in control. But then when Adrian de Mojica decided to try to take control, well, Dan comes in to my settlement and he says, I need your help to put down Mojica, the rebellion. Well, we had a pact. We started to, things started to reconcile a little bit better. And we captured Mojica and we killed him. Okay? And he was rounded up along with some others, and they were arrested and sent back. So you see, I was trying my best to keep the place stable, keep it peaceful, try to still work with the Indians. And at the time, I was getting into these difficulties. So the crown heard about all these difficulties. They decided to send Francisco de Bobadilla, who was supposed to do one thing. Find out what's going on. You have the power of arrest, and then report back what's going on. I was in the interior. That's another thing. Every time I left to explore, whether I was exploring the various islands on my voyages or in the interior, looking for food, water, and timber, and negotiating with the Indians to do that because we were always shorted by the royal officials. We never had enough. Or I was, working very, very hard to create a settlement or an outpost, what we called factoria. So all we were setting up is these little trading posts. There's no empire yet. I was dead when that started to happen by that time. And so Bobadilla comes in, and by the way, we had hung 7 Spaniards. He comes into the harbor and he goes, "What the heck is this?" And I said, very simply, they mistreated the Indians. They contravened sovereign policy, and they're paying the price. No due process, no charge. He grabbed me, he threw me in chains, threw me in the bowels of a ship, took my 2 brothers, threw them in another ship, and shipped me off to Castile. He wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to report back. Instead, he declared himself the viceroy of the islands. He's the big shot now. And what does he do? He does the same thing Roldan did. They went around the island killing people, stealing gold. He ingratiated himself with the men. They loved him. And this is what he said. And I quote, it's in the annals of time. "We don't know how long this enterprise is going to last. So do what you want." And do what they want, they did. You know all that savage brutality you might read about? Cutting off heads and swinging babies or banging them up against the trees and hanging them and playing games and auctioning off the women like they're commodities. There's your child ring. There's your prostitution rings. This is the garbage that was going on in the Bobadilla. Where was I? Being shipped back to Castile. But I wrote everything down that was going on, and I was going to send, and I sent it to the sovereigns to make them understand what was going on there. And then on my 4th voyage, another problem. They gave me the ships were terrible, loaded with shipworms. I barely made it to Jamaica in St. Ann's Bay. I lost 4 ships on that trip. It was a terrible trip. We should have never done it. Why? Hurricanes, waterspouts, storms, heat, humidity. We didn't have enough food. In fact, we had trouble in what you now know as Panama. We called it Balem then. And my men were so hungry and starving, the Indians wanted us off there, the Guami Indians. Because what they said to us was, what you eat in 3 days, we eat in 20. But they were starving. So we had to get ourselves out of there. I lost 4 ships because of the terrible storms. It was a total wasted trip. I was hung up on Jamaica. And when I got to Jamaica, I didn't even make the men get off the ship. I said, "You're going to make your huts on the ship. You're staying away from these Indians. I can't trust you with you guys." And I did my best to keep them there. And all of a sudden, an assassination conspiracy started to simmer when I wasn't around, going back into the interior trying to round up some food and water and timber for the men. And thanks to my brother, we had a little skirmish with our own men. They had to put these guys down. They wanted to get off the island. They demanded to get off the island. I said, "Listen, I sent 2 ships. 2 Hispaniola, 2 guys, Diego Mendez and Bartolomeo de Fieschi, 2 good friends of mine. And when they got there, Nicholas Diavando, the new viceroy, again, I blame the sovereigns. They picked up a lot of rogues there who cared only about their own selfish ambitions and their own greed, who care less about meeting the Grand Khan of Cathay. So you see, they were on one plane, I'm on another plane, and neither of the two shall meet. And the enterprise was in shambles again. So Nicholas Diavando, when he receives my 2 men, he says, "I'm going to let him rot there for 6 months." I know why. Because I knew what was going on in Hispaniola, and he would have been arrested and held as a criminal. So he thought I would die from the elements, from exposure. Ha ha, fooled him. We hung in there. Thanks to my brothers, thanks to whatever settlement we could conjure together, and thanks to me keeping the men as separated as much as I possibly could on the ship and away from the hinterlands, away from the natives, as best as I could. So what does Diavando do? He invites and has a big feast of all these natives. Okay, captures them all, throws them in a hut. 84 chiefs, locks them in the hut, and burns it to the ground. Approaches their queen, Anacayona, and says, I want you to be a concubine to all my men. And she said, I flatly refuse. I'm not going to subject myself to that. So they strung her up a tree and they hung her. Nicholas de Ovando. And they blame me for this? Do you understand that I had more trouble with the natives? I mean, more trouble with the Spaniards than I did with the natives? This was the problem. And a lot of it was because I was Genovese, not Spaniard. Because the Spanish were highly ethnocentric people at that time. They thought who the heck they were. And so as a result, I can tell you that these were my problems. The enterprise was a noble one. Did we meet the great Khan of Cathay? No. Did we convert as many people during my time there? No, because of the refusal by the missionaries, because I was too friendly with the natives. And they were killing our men. They caused the problem. If they didn't maraud the village and rape the women and create this and enslave some of these people when I was gone, we would have had a much more noble enterprise, my brothers and sisters. And so, when I went back after my fourth voyage, I was pretty sick by that time. My writer's syndrome was acting up on me. My eyesight was failing. I petitioned the Crown to make sure you pay the men. This is really important. A lot of the men were very upset, and they kind of left the settlement because of the heat, humidity, and all this work and all of this travel for a lousy, measly wage. But at least what had happened, I did discover a new world. And today, that particular land, upon it sits the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of the earth. You may call your George Washington the father of your country, but I am surely your grandfather. And if it wasn't for me, who knows what the course of world history would have been. Would it have been better or worse? We don't know. However, there was an exchange. We learned a lot about the tomato, the potato, maize, and peppers, and squash, and pumpkins. And we gave them the horse and the wheel and some armaments. They learned about our armaments. So that was the good part about it. Okay? And when I passed on May 22nd, 1506, my last words as a devout Christian, and I said them in Latin, In manus tuas, Domine, commendo spiritum meum. In your hands, Lord, I commend my spirit. The same words Christ uttered on the cross before his death were my same last words. And so I passed. So I think now you know the history. You know about the legacy. You know I was an honest man trying to do a great job, trying to spread Christianity. Fearful of the same second coming of Christ and the possibility that people would be subjected to eternal damnation. I did the best I could. Didn't have the support I would have liked. The sovereigns made some poor choices, and the people that succeeded me, I do put some blame on them. And when I was away, I created this commission, this small governing council consisting of the clergy and the settlers and some of my men, and they just couldn't handle these ambitious, avaricious rogues who just wrecked the island and cared only about their own wealth and their own greed and their own ambition. I was on a different plane, and that was my function. Tried to spread Christianity all over the world. And I can see that as a result, it has been going all over the world. So it's nice that I planted the seminal seed. So I want to say to DJ Johnny, thank you so very much for allowing me to
Grazia.
state my case. And ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters, all I want to say to you is Felice Giorno di Colombo. Happy Columbus Day in my honor. Please do your best to protect my legacy, protect my name. It's not just a printed name on a calendar. It's the statuary. It's not just a hunk of bronze and granite. Okay, it has meaning. And I think for all the things that I did, this, creating this transmigration and discovering this new world, I think I deserve a holiday and a lot of statues in my name. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Bravo. Bravo, Cristobal. That was incredible.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
just
it.
want to let everybody know, thanks to Lou Gallo, we got some great shirts here. If anybody wants one of these shirts, you just email me at djjohnnycprod@aol.com. I'm going to show you my email in 1 second, and I'll be more than happy to get you guys one of these shirts out as soon as possible, to protect the legacy and the history of Columbus, this great man, these great voyages. There's my email address right there. Just say, hey, Johnny C, I want one of those bad Columbus Day shirts. It's right from the order of Sons and Daughters of Italy in America. And I got mine right here, and you can have yours as well. And help protect this great legacy, this great explorer. Now, Lou Gallo, tell the people out here what a big contribution that Columbus made to the Spanish, to Latinos. Tell them where the biggest
Yes.
statues in the world are. I believe the
Very
Dominican
true.
Republic,
Well,
right?
in my research, I can tell you that the Dominicans and the Puerto Ricans adore this man.
And we have a lot of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, people from Brazil.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the world on my show. That's why I want you to tell these
Well,
people.
you know, as he came to the islands 4 times, he brought with him Spanish crewmen. Eventually, they intermingled and intermarried with the natives, and that's what they called mestizos. The union of European and native Indian blood is mestizos, which is the laying the foundation for the Latino culture. So, for Latinos, I must tell you, Christopher's legacy and heritage is as important to you as it is to the Americans and the Italians.
Right. This is what I've been saying for years.
Right.
And I don't think people just realize
No, they don't,
how
because
important this man really was.
this man has, I mean, what he has done, and the part that I got to tell you, I make it sound that he had this vision, and he did these wonderful things as a consequence to his discovery. You cannot believe, John, that the adversity this man faced, the heat, the humidity was oppressive, the constant starvation, these hidalgos that went with him. These were nobles. They wanted to come in there, carve out their little fiefdom, have the men as slaves and the women as prostitutes and concubines. And I said, no, you're not doing that. You're going to work like everybody else. They wouldn't give me the horses to move stone and timber. They wouldn't do that. And as men were dying from the swine flu and the malaria, we had that problem. I demanded they worked, and when they didn't, I whipped them. I whipped them. And they used to come back with, "Oh, you don't know how to treat a gentleman." Well, you're not acting like a gentleman, for crying out loud. If you want to demonstrate your legitimacy as a political entity or as Christians, you sure as heck are not demonstrating it at all in good stead. I mean, you're actually showing the worst of humanity, and that's what they showed. And after the Factoria, after Columbus had died, I'm getting into character again. But after he had died,
It just comes natural.
after Roldan had created the encomienda system, they said, "Oh, you know what? Instead of these little outposts, let's create an empire." So they brought all these people over, and they made the plantations big, and then they enslaved all the Indians, and then they brought in African slaves as the plantations got bigger, and also that's part of Latino culture, some African blood too. So it's African, European, and Native. So that is the Columbus laid the seminal seed for the Latino culture. I don't care if you're from Ecuador, Guatemala, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. He's as important to your heritage and history. In fact, the Puerto Ricans celebrated twice Columbus Day, once the regular, and on November 19th, because in November 19th, 1493, he discovered Puerto Rico, and they honored him.
Wow.
Okay? There's a tremendous monument. It's 350 feet in the air. It's the tallest statue in the whole world of Columbus. In fact, prior
In
to
Puerto
this,
Rico?
yes.
I thought it was in Dominica.
No, in Dominican Republic is the tomb, which is
Oh,
about
okay.
100 feet in the air.
Gotcha.
Because, and again, that's another story I can get into. He could be in 3 places. Okay,
Right,
and
right.
National Geographic hired all these researchers.
Didn't they take DNA?
They said
they
they
still
couldn't get
can't.
enough DNA to decide conclusively where he is. I mean, you're talking about over 500 years, so there's going to be deterioration. So what could you do? Okay, he could be in Seville, Spain. He could be in Cuba, or he could be in the Dominican Republic.
I
And
would
the
bet
story is
probably.
crazy how they kept moving it because of certain events. So they kept moving him around. And then when they saw bones, they just combined bones with other bones and
I would
lopped them in
probably
one.
bet that it's either Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic. That's
Well,
my guess.
well,
I could be wrong. I
he,
mean,
he I was told by a Dominican who told me, "Oh yeah, there's a great." I saw the picture of the tomb. It's like amazing. My God! Supposedly, there's also a tomb in Seville, Spain, because they think he's there. So there are two tombs. There are two mausoleums on both ends,
right.
and then you got Puerto Rico with their big statue. And prior to this garbage going on, he had he was the most popular world statue. He was the popular statue in the whole wide world. He was on three continents: North America, South America, and Europe.
How
So,
old is the one in Columbus Circle? But since
oh,
the
that came up
1800s,
in
right?
yeah, that came up in. Let's see. Let me get my
Got to be
around the
1890.
1930. No, it was in the. Let's see. Well, you see, the statuary is another story too, because Italians, as you well know, was faced with invidious discrimination and bigotry, and they wanted to be such a part of the mosaic of the Italian, the American society. So they decided that let's show Americans that we really believe in their legacy and their heritage and this land. So we chose a very popular Italian at the time, Christopher Columbus, and they decided common Italians with their own money from their own hands were actually hiring sculptors and architects to create these statues. So when they go in there and they destroy it, you're destroying a historical artifact that has tremendous meaning because Italians can identify with Columbus because as he trekked across the Atlantic and faced adversity, so did they. And the fact that he is from Genoa, well, he's a favorite son. So, and he was very attractive to the Americans. So they started to build these statues. And then in 1937, in the Knights of Columbus, which at that time was loaded mostly with Italians, they lobbied the U.S. Congress and Franklin Roosevelt to create a federal holiday in his name. And in 1937, that legislation passed. So for the last 84 years, we've been celebrating a federal holiday. Okay, the celebration on the ground has been going on since 1792 when it first started in New York City as a way to honor Columbus. Okay,
Oh,
and it's been
absolutely amazing.
1792, and you just want to take him off a calendar and you just want to rip down a statue? Makes
Well,
absolutely no sense
it
whatsoever.
amazes me because us being New Yorkers, it's one of the biggest parades in the country
Yeah, it is
every year.
every year,
And
and that's been going on for how
it's
many
something
years?
else. It's got to be
Right.
about 90 years,
Well,
100
that
years, close
particular
to it.
group, the Citizens Columbus Foundation, the Christopher Columbus Foundation, is a possibility. It might have been around then, but that statue went up, and most of those statues were sculpted by Italians, Italian people. In fact, there's an interesting story in Syracuse. Their statue there is under a threat, and that was built in the 1930s. And the Italians there, the community wanted to show so much support, and they rounded up some money, but not enough. And Mussolini, Benito Mussolini helped the cause. And right away people say, well, you see, this is a fascist artifact. No, it's not. He had nothing to do with fascism at the time. In fact, he was a budding, all right, he wasn't a full dictator yet. That doesn't make sense. But he wasn't as incorrigible as he became. And he was simply helping the Italian people with the funding and the shipping over the granite and this pedestal and all that jazz. So that's how he helped, in that sense.
Well,
And
but in closing, before we close, there's two subjects I want you to touch base on
okay,
because Lou Gallo is one of the most knowledgeable people and were was a social studies teacher for
hmm
many years and a historian, and this man knows his stuff and he's very knowledgeable. Tell the people about what happened on the last night, his crew, and you don't make it too long, but just let them know what you told me one night about how they thought that he was lost and what they were going to do to him. I don't think people realize that he wasn't very liked by his men.
No, he wasn't. No. First of all, he had things running against him, even in the court, in the Spanish court. He was a man that was quite secretive about his life. All right. He came from very modest means. He only had a grammar school education. His father was always in debt, and his father was a jack of all trades. He was not only a weaver, but he ran a tavern. He got a political job. He was the gatekeeper of the Olivetta Gate in Genoa, part-time notary. I mean, wherever he could scrounge a couple of bucks, he would. And here's a man that has this tremendous, momentous enterprise, and he wants to, you know, meet with people who can, you know, financially support the mission, and he didn't want to let them know their background. And another thing too is the Genoese also fought with the Spanish, particularly the House of Aragon, of which Ferdinand was a part. And Ferdinand, by the way, had, Columbus had two strikes against him. First of all, he was Genoese. Two, Ferdinand didn't like him because of that. So he struck up a much stronger relationship with Isabella, who was, kindred spirits. They believed in the mission. She was a devout Christian. Ferdinand was always in the background and it was like always poo pooing anything that Columbus had to do. So there's this story, and we're finding out again. I can give you so much background, but eventually, Columbus and his heirs, for about 100 years, sued the Spanish government for titles and assets that were taken away from him. Because he was getting blamed for all of these atrocities, and it just wasn't true. And in fact, he didn't even want to go back to Hispaniola as the viceroy. That's how Diovando got the job, because he said these men are horrible. So by mutual agreement, they decided, he's not going to go back there. The revisionists say, yeah, he lost his titles and he wasn't the viceroy anymore. It was kind of a mutual agreement.
Well, what I was pertaining to was when the last night that they either find land or they're going to
Oh
kill
yes,
him and
okay,
throw him over the ship.
yeah. Okay,
And,
so
and he saw the lights.
it's a great story. He had two sets of logs. One log, he was documenting it, but he always shortened the distance because he kept showing that there was a lot of miles, so there's nautical miles. Then they wouldn't, they would get more, discouraged and fearful and the whole bit. So there was a meeting. They had a meeting. They used to meet every early morning. The ships would come together someplace, whatever, out in the open sea, and they had a meeting. And there was threats of mutiny. They're going to throw him overboard. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And he said, "Look, I'll tell you what. If in 3 days we don't find land, we'll go home." All right. This was Thursday, October the 11th. That night, he is praying and praying because he on that ship, they prayed throughout the day. I mean, they were such devout people. They were praying throughout the day. They had certain periods at a time. They prayed like 5, 6 times a day into the night. He was praying. He'd read the office, what the clerical office, like a priest would. And he comes back on his ship and he's looking out and he thought he saw a light. And he said to the mate, "Did you see a light over there?" He goes, "Yeah, I thought I saw something." And he went to the guy to the right. "Did you see anything?" He said, "No, I didn't see anything." He says, "Well, keep your eyes on that light. I think there's a light there." Okay. Well, that was at about 10 o'clock at night on October the 11th. At 2 o'clock in the morning, October the 12th, Rodrigo Triana from Lepi, Spain, is up on a crow's nest and he yells out, "Tierra, tierra, land, land." Well, they all came rushing, and they were about, at that time, about 6 leagues out, which is like about 18 miles. And they could see the outlines of the land because there was a full moon behind them. And they finally landed at about 6 in the morning. The first thing they did was to literally hit the ground and kiss the ground. He proved at that point that you could cross the Atlantic. There's no doubt about it. What they used to call the Green Sea of Darkness, because nobody went there. That's why it was darkness, Green Sea, the whole bit. But yeah, he was, and that last night, he had 3 days, but he was woo. Uh, there were all kinds of talks too that are legendary and false, because when he sued the Crown for his assets, the Pinzone crew from Palos actually were um, witnesses against him. Because what happened was Pinzone was a pain. He was another one. He wasn't an atrocious man, but he wanted the glory. So what he would do is he kept saying in the Pinta, "Oh, there's land there," and it was always a mirage. So they had this contest, and whoever found land would get 10,000 maravedis, some kind of coins, whatever, and you'd get that as an annuity every year, every for the rest of your life. That's what the Crown put up that money. And he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you a gold jacket called a doublet too. I'll throw that in there." So it got to be hectic because they were getting diverted from their course. They were getting consumed by this. It was delaying their trip. That's why it took so long, in a sense. And he decided that from now on, if you claim you found land, you have 3 days to decide and see if it's true. If it's not, you're out of the contest. Now, supposedly, this one meeting that I just described to you, which is the way it really happened, there was talk that at that meeting, and this is what the Pinzone people were saying in the court to try to stem Columbus's ability to collect his assets once again, and they said, "Nah, he was so discouraged that he went to Pinzone and he said to Pinzone, 'You take over, you take over.'" Not true. The second story is Pinzone came up to him and said, "That's it. We're getting out of here. We've had it. We're throwing you overboard and we're taking over." That didn't happen. What really happened was this mutual agreement that they would get the next 3 days.
Right, right.
And, well, they found it on October the 12th, the next day.
So let the great people in the Planet Beat Nation, in closing, know where do you get all this incredible history. Tell us about these journals that you've read about. Tell us the
Mhm.
historians that you collaborated with to write all this great stuff
Right.
because you've written some great stuff. You've gone all over the country defending this man like I've never seen in my life. And only with the history and the knowledge that you have could you do such a feat.
Well, I would say to your listening audience, very simple. You can put this all together in one spot. We created our own website called columbusthetruth.org. Take a look at it, columbusthetruth.org. It'll take you a couple of weeks to go through it, but we got all the historians. We commissioned 4 historians who wrote positive pieces about Columbus: Carol Delaney, Raphael Ortiz. And the historians I have, listen to this. 3 of them are not even Italian. Only one is. And one of the 4 is so left wing, she says, "Yeah, but not on Columbus." She's so protective of Columbus. She is a cultural anthropologist, Carol Delaney. And why? What is great about a cultural anthropologist is they don't just write the history, read the journals, and write the history. They actually become the man, almost like what I'm doing. She went to his house. She went to all of his haunts. She did the work of a sailor on a ship. She traveled his route on a ship, the same route.
Oof.
Would you believe it? She became this guy. And then she wrote from that perspective. And do you know that route that you take to the Caribbean is the same route Columbus
Right, it's
started?
famous. Right.
Cruise ships, military ships, and
Historic.
commercial ships use that same route.
Right, right.
That same route. And this guy doesn't deserve a holiday in his name? He doesn't deserve a statue? What are you kidding me?
Fanable.
And all of the trouble, as I said, it wasn't him. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. And the fact that he went and got those 1,500, it was a defensive action, so to speak, to calm the place down and ship these people. The idea was to keep them separate from each other, surveil them. He took, of that 1,500, he sent 500 back. 300 died because of the exposure. They're tropical people. And some of them starved, too. They don't tell you he freed 400 of them. And then the other 600, he divvied up amongst the 600 men. The idea was to keep a watch on them. And at the same time, some of them were forced to work in the coal mines to get the gold. All right. But that was typical at that time. You know, when somebody came in and made you part of their realm, then you paid them a tribute. The United States of America was
Well,
paying a tribute to the Barbary pirates of North Africa until the Jefferson administration. so that we would get free passes through the Mediterranean, through the Strait of Gibraltar. So it's nothing new. That was 17. That was the 17, 1800s. This goes back to the 1400s. It's typical. The natives did it the same thing. They paid tribute to each other. The Iroquois used to come down to Long Island, and of course the Long Island Indians were much more peaceful. The Shinnecock, the Montaukett, all of them. They used to actually pay them, the Iroquois, wampum beads and belts to keep them the hostility away, to pacify the Iroquois. So it was a typical thing. You know, he stole from. He didn't steal anything. He's doing he was a man of his times, and that was what the natural thing to do. But he didn't own a slave. He never bought a slave. He didn't maraud or rape a woman slave. None of that. And they say, oh, yeah, he did all that. He's a genocidal maniac and a murderer. No, he's not. Rodrigo Escobedo is. Pedro Gutierrez, Diego de Arana, Adrian de Mojica, Nicholas de Ovando, Francisco Roldan, Francisco de Bobadilla. Throw in Nicholas de Ovando, throw in Diego Escobar and Francisco and Diego de Porras, and guess what? You got the whole crew that caused all of the troubles in that enterprise. So go to the ColumbusTheTruth.org, and if you want to, I did a 30-minute presentation in Columbus too on YouTube. Just put in Lou Gallo as Columbus and Google that, and you'll get it. Or if you want, go to youtube.com and in the search box put Italian America Long Island and look for Lou Gallo as Columbus. There's either way. It's been running, and I'm getting rave reviews. No, none of this. All of this is what I'm getting. And so, it's the truth, and the truth has to be told. And this is the truth.
Well,
After 8 years of study, I've been doing this. 8 years, and I'm still doing it. I got a whole box I have to go through that the
well,
historians gave me.
well, people, you got it from the mouth of Lou Gallo, the great Lou Gallo. It
Thanks a
doesn't
lot.
get better than this. I mean, you got a historic lesson on Columbus in the Planet Beat studio live on Club Planet Beat with DJ Johnny-CEE. Once again, anybody wants any of these bad t-shirts, you just get a hold of me and email me, and I'll get one out to you as soon as I can. And, it was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure having the great Lou Gallo on Planet Beat. This is DJ Johnny-CEE, and this is the man Lou Gallo.
Thank you,
And
John.
we are out, and this is going to be a historic show presentation that I'm going to show every year on Club Planet Beat. This is DJ Johnny-CEE from New York, and I'm out. Peace.